Hello and welcome back to this damn full idealistic crusade. This video is a review of the Kino Lorber Blu-ray release of two really wonderful 1916 Douglas Fairbanks silent classics. It's sold under the primary feature of The Half-Breed, but it also includes the 1916 film that came slightly before that, The Good Bad Man, which unfortunately only survives in a cut-down version, which is why it's kind of advertised as the secondary feature. So to jump into these two films, both of which were restored as best as humanly possible and look absolutely fantastic in spite of inherent damage and issues and things. The first film, The Good Bad Man, which as the notes credit is probably the first film where Fairbanks really took a sort of control over the story elements and things and could be considered an auteur of the film in that sense, is a really interesting Western story. And again, it's only surviving in a cut-down reissue version, which runs about 50 minutes. So the narrative is unfortunately a little bit compromised in ways, but it's still a really enjoyable film. It was directed by Allan Dwan, who would also direct the Half-Breed, and most of the same crew with some of the same cast members appear in both films. So there's a lot of carryover between the two. This film was photographed by Victor Fleming while he was still a cinematographer, and he photographed both films. This has wonderful, beautiful landscape photography, of course in black and white. There is no color tinting, but with this film, it works beautifully. This is a beautiful film to look at simply, even though, obviously a silent film and any film you're staring at. But this is a silent where the visuals will really bowl you over quite frequently. And it's where you have the landscape really become a secondary character in the film. So that's why the HD transfer is so beautiful and has all the natural grain structure intact and things. So the story is rather simple but interesting, in that Fairbanks plays a wanted outlaw figure, but he isn't simply robbing people or doing things like a regular sort of cliched Western outlaw is doing. Everything he does is to benefit the poor, the downtrodden, and especially single mothers, because we find that he himself comes from a background where he doesn't know who his father is, and that's always preyed on him and makes him feel lesser than, which is an interesting sort of theme that runs through a number of Fairbanks films and will, of course, turn up in The Half-Breed. So thematically, these two films are linked directly, in addition to having a lot of the same cast and crew and being made in close proximity to each other in the same year. But he is an atypical sort of outlaw and seems to only do things to help others and also make things a bit less boring, because the last thing any Fairbanks character ever wants to do is get bored, because he seems incapable of having any sort of boredom in his life. The rest of the film has many expected cliches. The love interest is played by Bessie Love, who looks wonderful and quite radiant the way that Fleming photographs her. And then Sam DeGrasse plays the villain of the piece, as he did frequently in many Fairbanks films. And of course, he would turn up in The Half-Breed as well. So you see many sort of things that would be commonplace in a Western, and it plays out and mostly the way you would expect. And it's, of course, abbreviated by it only being the cut-down 50-minute version. So unfortunately, the narrative is a bit compromised here and there because we're not seeing the full original film, and it's really still kind of unknown what the missing pieces would have done or fleshed out additional character aspects and things. But what remains is still a really, truly enjoyable film that, if you didn't know the fact that this is not the full original film, you would still enjoy it and feel it was a complete film experience, even though it's under an hour at 50 minutes. So don't let the idea that this is a cut-down film and it's not the complete original version deter you from watching this, because this is still really effective and well done and well performed and actually well staged, well edited, and again, beautifully photographed by Fleming, that it's an enjoyable film in its own right, even though we don't have the whole thing. So it's amazing to see in this Blu-ray transfer. So to talk a bit about the picture quality, this, of course, being a silent film, means that they're having to work from surviving sources which are very compromised in their own ways. This was a restoration undertaken by the San Francisco Silent Film Society, the Cinémathèque Française, and the Film Preservation Society, and is coming from a 1923 cut down reissue version. So that's when this version was made, was in 1923, and that's what they have to work from, because unfortunately that's all that is known to survive. The quality they have pulled out of this, combined with Fleming's photography, will just make you marvel. This is a beautiful film to look at. Of course, you are going to run into bits of damage that are inherent and inescapable due to the compromised nature of the sources. That means you're going to see a little bit of scratches, you're going to see a little bit of frame wobble, a little bit of light fluctuation here and there. You're going to see some missing frames pop up here and there. That is just to be expected, and all of it is on the minor side. So if you're not somebody who really notices things like that, you're not really going to notice anything that's too detrimental. But even those are not major and won't detract from your viewing experience. I just happen to pretty much notice any sort of defect because that's how my brain is wired. And I also find it fascinating when things survive and look so beautiful in spite of the inherent damage in the sources. So again, the photography by Fleming is really phenomenal here, and especially all the landscape photography. This is a beautiful looking Western, actually, and it's from 1916. So don't let the fact that it's a silent film deter you, and the fact that it's not the complete version deter you from seeing this. Seeing these visuals in high definition as well in this restoration, in spite of the inherent issues, it's really something to marvel over, and you can see how good of a cameraman that Fleming was long before he became a director. So it's a really beautiful film to look at. I did notice one or two small spots of what looked like maybe some sort of motion stuttering a little. I don't know if that's simply because of how silent films have to be encoded. You always have to engage in some trickery because silent films are at different frame rates, and for some idiotic reason, the Blu-ray standard and the UHD standard as well does not allow for different frame rates outside of the standard sound frame rates. So that means with all silent films, you have to do all kinds of things and frame pull down, or even do a 1080i interlaced Blu-ray release to try and make it much more proper to how the actual silent film presentation was. So it frequently means that even in really great releases, you might see an occasional a bit of combing or motion stuttering or something, and sometimes they have to duplicate frames and different things. So it does. I did notice one or two very small spots where it seemed like there was maybe some duplicate frames here and there, but again, I think that's just due to how this was encoded in order to get the different frame rate on the Blu-ray release. This has a brand new score, which is wonderful, by the always great Donald Sozin. The intertitles seem to be a mixture of original surviving ones and then newly created ones. I think most of them, if not all, were newly created and do fit with the style of the film perfectly. And the score is, to talk about the audio, is a brand new stereo score by Donald Sozin, who does his usual, always excellent job. This is a beautiful score, and it really enhances the experience of this film. So the only downside of this really is the fact that we're still stuck with a 1923 cut down reissue version and not seeing the full film. That's the only downside here. This is a beautiful looking film that looks incredible quite frequently in this HD presentation, and it would be worth purchasing alone by itself. And it's a really wonderful film, even though it's stuck in the 50-minute edited version. So don't think of this just as a bonus feature. This is a double feature release, and this film is so good and so enjoyable, even in its compromised 50-minute edit, that it would be worth purchasing in its own right as a standalone release. This is a real gem, I think, and it's one of those films that I wish I had seen sooner, and is incredible for Fairbanks fans, for Western fans. It's beautifully photographed and wonderfully presented in this new restoration. And then we come to the main feature, the 1916 The Half-Breed. This is a film that had to be painstakingly reconstructed, not just restored, but reconstructed scene by scene to try and approximate the original 1916 release version, because the film was cut down many different times, released in different edits with different titles, with different title cards that completely changed the nature of the story in its entirety. So this was a painstaking restoration that also was a painstaking reconstruction of an entire film, which the extras do go into at great length. So this is a film that if you ever saw it before, you never saw it properly. This is an incredible silent film. This is a silent film that is decades ahead of its time. This is a silent film that anyone and everyone should see. It's absolutely amazing and actually quite astounding that it actually got made at this time in 1916. Again, a lot of the same personnel and cast and crew make the jump from The Good Bad Man to The Half-Breed. So it's a lot of the same faces. Once again, directed by Allan Dwan. This time it is written by the great Anita Loos, and again, starring Douglas Fairbanks, who put his own personal stamp on the film and had a great amount of creative control. Both films were actually produced, or at least supervised, by D.W. Griffith in terms of the actual credits. And this film, the reason why I say it's so ahead of its time, it's actually dealing with the themes of racism, because Fairbanks plays the half-breed of the title. He is of mixed ethnicity. His mother was Native American. His father was a white man who abandons them when he is a small baby. And the opening of the film is the mother being so distraught at being not just stuck with her newborn, but being ostracized by practically everyone, that she gives her baby to someone she trusts and then commits suicide. And then after that, for an opening, we then see the child grown up, whose name is essentially Falling Water, but is known as Low for short. And this is the Fairbanks character. And he has a humble, lovely existence, but pretty much sticks to living with his adopted father in nature, in these beautiful surroundings. The film is once again gorgeously photographed by Victor Fleming. It's so much so that it's just an incredible naturescape throughout. But essentially, he finally winds up making his way to the big city when his adopted father dies. And of course, being of mixed heritage and also not being a biological child, but primarily because he has any Native American blood in him at all, he is legally not allowed to claim any of his adopted father's property and is basically thrown out on his own. And when he makes it to the big city, winds up getting into a love triangle of sorts with this sort of unobtainium, beautiful female figure who is also lusted after by the rather racist town sheriff, played by, once again, Sam DeGrasse. And we also get the notion that maybe Lowe will, in the course of the story, perhaps encounter the father who abandoned him and his mother many, many years before. Things are complicated further by the fact that the love triangle becomes a sort of love quadrangle with the introduction of the other major female character, the character of Teresa, played by Alma Rubens, who is rather surprisingly, and again, a bit more honest and forward-thinking, even for a film at this time, is a character who comes into town with a snake oil salesman, but is also very clearly a prostitute. So she kind of is on the outskirts of society and ostracized by many and sort of overlooked. So then we have a very interesting sort of love quadrangle going on that then goes in and out of the city and through the different classes and things. So the film is actually a very wonderfully textured examination of racism in a 1916 film that could also be considered a bit of a Western, and also a beautiful natural landscape. It's one of those silents that you see that is quite mind-boggling, because you don't expect this level of heavy themes that are explored and actually nuanced and textured, and all about very nuanced, introspective character study. And in such beautiful natural surroundings, beautifully photographed by Victor Fleming. And once again, like The Good Bad Man, you can tell that Fairbanks at least associated somewhat with this theme, because it runs through a lot of his films, because it was something he dealt with in his own life, not knowing about his parentage and all 100%, and trying to downplay his past history, because it was sort of baggage that he carried with him, and he carried this sort of internal guilt that he was somehow never quite good enough. And I think anyone can associate with that. And so you see it turn up interestingly in several throughout his career, really, but you see it turn up in both of these films from the same year, but most of all here in The Half-Breed. So you have a star who's fully committed to this part, and to give it such nuance and such deep emotional feeling. It's a really legitimate dramatic performance from Fairbanks. He's not doing a lot of what we expect from Doug, of the amazing acrobatics and things. You get a little bit of that, but nothing that wouldn't be outside of the ordinary for a guy who's, lived in the wonderful natural surroundings all his life, and makes his living out of that, because he's actually a bit of a botanist, and that's how he supports himself. All the characters in this film are really well drawn. They are really well textured, and everything is handled with a sense of dignity, that it's not stereotyping characters or anything. We do see some other Native American characters who are in and around the town and are essentially made into a mockery of themselves, and that is only done to show how others like Lowe are treated, but that some unfortunately feel all they could do is really just sort of go along with it, and maybe just drink their sorrows away, and live with this just an intensive amount of racism directed towards them. So it is a really astonishingly effective film that you just don't expect going in. Again, this is a film decades ahead of its time. It is incredibly well made, well put together, and also has a delicate sense of the human condition, which is the most striking thing about this film. You see this, and the whole time you can't believe this is from 1916, which makes it all the more unfortunate that it's been so kicked around over the years. And you can understand why people might not like a film like this. It's a very heavy film. It was not a financial success when it was originally released, and it was seen as a bit of a failure, and it was so significantly cut down, and the meaning and the story was so significantly altered and diluted or changed entirely, that you can maybe understand why people might do that on a reissue, or to try to make money out of this thing, because this is such tough subject matter that they obviously felt audiences wouldn't take it, or they themselves didn't want to deal with this, so they chopped it up and watered it down and changed it in any way possible to make it more palatable and make it easier to digest, and take all the hard stuff out, take all the bite out of the picture, take the heavy hitting out of the picture, which means that if you ever saw this before in its various forms, it did not have the same bite to it. It didn't have the same heaviness. And I will tell you, when you get to the end of this film, which climaxes in a really rather impressively staged forest fire, this has a phenomenal ending shot that will stick with you. This is a beautifully made film. This is a perfect film to show to any silent film newcomers. This is quite modern in its approach, which is shocking for a 1916 film. This is a truly great silent film, and this is a revelatory presentation, because again, this film had to be completely reconstructed from the ground up from a variety of different elements, most of which being these various cut down edited versions. And the extras go into the painstaking detail that they had to do to bring this film back to life. So this is not just a restoration from the best surviving elements. This is a complete reconstruction on a shot-by-shot basis of the original film. This is an absolute treasure. This is I think, one of the most important silent film releases on Blu-ray there is, simply for that fact. This is a great silent film that has been brought back from the dead, essentially, because they had to go in and physically reconstruct the film as best as humanly possible with all the research that they were able to do with limited materials, as you can imagine, to try and reconstruct the film to, as close as humanly possible, approximate the original 1916 release version. This is a 2013 restoration by the San Francisco Silent Film Festival in cooperation with the Cinémathèque Française, the Library of Congress, Lobster Films, and Ritrovata in Italy. So you have 5 entities involved. A whole variety of elements were brought together, and this was a very, very painstaking effort that, again, the extras go into great detail about, which I'll talk about in a minute. So the picture quality, the sources were a mix of both 35mm and 16mm. So unfortunately, there are a number of sections where they had to go down to lesser quality sources, and you will see the quality drop off, but it's amazing we even have this footage in any form, so that is to be expected. It doesn't detract from your experience, but you will come to several points where you're obviously going to have to jump down to that 16mm footage that's just all there is, and it's amazing we even have that. You're going to see, scratches, lines, frame wobble, damage pop up, hairs. That's to be expected. The worst spot in particular, though, where most people are going to go, oh, okay, this is really bad, is where there is such significant deterioration in a really pivotal moment when Lo first comes to the town, where they were stuck using this source that otherwise it's still the best quality and the only thing that survives. But unfortunately, it's damage so extensive in this and one other scene later in the film in particular, where the damage obscures significant parts of the screen, if not the whole screen. Unfortunately, we just have to live with this, and it's understandable because this is just all that survives, and these are truly important moments. So at least we still have something there, and it doesn't stay constant. It sort of goes in and out, and you'll just have to get used to that. It thankfully only lasts for really those brief moments, but it is there, and it does obscure significant parts to the entirety of the image for those particular moments. But you just have to live with that, and just keep in mind they are very small isolated spots, but that is the biggest damage, because again, it pretty much just unfortunately obscures the whole frame at certain points. But those are only in those specific moments, and that is simply because that's all that survives for these pivotal moments. The intertitles had to mostly be recreated from scratch and try to approximate the original titles as closely as possible. They were able to use some surviving original titles, but because most of what they were having to use were the cut-down versions where the entire meaning of the story was changed, that meant they also changed all the title cards. So the title cards in some instances were so significantly altered. You had different character names. The actual writing was dumbed down. They have some great comparisons in some of the extras where you literally see how dumbed down and significantly altered even the title cards were. And with a silent film, if you just make a bunch of edits and you significantly change the title cards, you've very much changed the nature of the film. So the film was compromised pretty much in all of these cut-down versions. So getting something approximating the original titles is massive. So again, do keep in mind that most of the titles, if not close to all of them, had to be recreated from scratch. So in spite of the inherent damage and having to be a patchwork of sources, and in spite of seeing the typical things like some unavoidable scratches and lines and bits of inherent damage to these sources, this is a marvelous video presentation. This is a marvelous looking film. Again, beautifully photographed by Victor Fleming, full of beautiful natural landscapes, and it really enhances this wonderful drama. This is a phenomenal film, and I think this presentation will make any silent film fan marvel over it, in spite of the inherent damage and the patchwork of elements that had to be to even create this. But you definitely have to take your hat off to the restorers and putting in this incredible amount of hard work, research, and effort to bring this film back from the dead and reconstruct it frame by frame from scratch, including all of the title cards. To talk about the audio, this again has a beautiful new Donald Sosin score. It beautifully enhances everything in the film, follows the action perfectly, and it is so well done that, you know, if somebody had said, oh, well, this was the original score, you would believe them because it's that well done. So it just like the Good Bad Man score, Sosin provides a beautiful accompanying score in stereo. So I do think this is a must-own silent film. I think this is a silent, not just a silent film classic, now that you can see it in something approximating its original release version. I think this is a masterful silent film. This is a must-see silent film. This is a truly great film, period. And again, it is decades ahead of its time in handling this subject matter with this level of sensitivity and depth and character depth, with all of the interpersonal relationships, and not hiding the fact that there are shades of gray in life. This is an incredible film, and particularly because it's made in 1916. So I knew that just reading the description of this, that this would be at least a good film, but I was very curious to see how the subject matter was handled. But I did not expect it to be this well done. I should have, looking at the crew list, of course, but this is a truly great must-see silent film that now can finally be seen properly after being treated to horrible presentations that completely alter or remove the meaning of this truly great silent film. This is, while The Good Bad Man is an enjoyable silent classic and a film I really enjoyed, and probably, of course, would be better when seen complete, The Half-Breed is a silent masterpiece. This is a masterpiece. It is a brilliant film that will bowl you over and is at least 40 or 50 years ahead of its time in terms of handling this subject matter with this level of sensitivity, and you just can't help but marvel over it. And the fact that this was made in 1916 and we can now see it at least in something with the same sort of intensive subject matter being handled extremely well, which you did not get in all of the edited cut-down versions, which tried to remove every aspect that makes this film great, or water it down to such an extent that it wasn't even there anymore, right down to even changing all of the character names and removing all kinds of events. So this is really a marvel that we have this film now able to view in a cleaned up version that reconstructs the film to be how it was originally seen in 1916. And you can now recognize just how great this film is and how incredibly ahead of its time it is. This is a silent masterpiece. Now we come to the Kino Lorber Blu-ray release, and to talk about the packaging. This has gorgeous artwork. Let's see if I can get the glare off of it. So here you have the artwork for the Half-Breed, which this is actually from, it's a beautiful rendering of the closing image of the film. And if you see this, the film is as poetic as this image is. So it is a beautiful cover. Of course, it has the little mention of The Good Bad Man here, which kind of looks like an afterthought, and it's usually just sold as the Half-Breed. But do keep in mind you are getting two films for the price of one. The rear has the matching artwork for the Half-Breed with the description and the mention of the extras. The interior has the disc label, which just credits the Half-Breed. But as you can see, as I had displayed when I was talking about the other film, it does have reversible artwork with beautiful original poster art for The Good Bad Man. So this is one of the Kino releases that actually has multiple films, and each one has its own art. It's just reversible. So that's how you know this actually has both films, but the way that it's sold, it's kind of misleading unless you read the fine print that this is actually two films in one. Then we turn to the supplemental features, which you wouldn't think there would be too many, but this has some really important, substantial ones. So not only do you get the 2 films, but you also get 2 brand new audio commentaries by Robert Byrne, the film's restorer, and Tracy Gossel, head of the Film Preservation Society, who participated in this release, and also the author of the great Fairbanks biography, The First King of Hollywood, which is a must-read. So they made 2 brand new commentaries for both films, so you get to hear them talk about both films, the preservation status, the release history of the films, the importance for them in Fairbanks' career, the cast and crew, how the films were put together, how they were made, and how the restorations were carried out. So they cover every topic, and they're wonderful, very warm, conversational, easy listens. So they are great commentaries in and of themselves. So not only are you getting 2 films for the price of 1 and amazing must-own restorations, but 2 great commentaries as well. So the value for your money is stratospheric. But if that wasn't enough, you get, of course, they credit the new Donald Sosin scores. You get a nice photo gallery for both films on the disc. But you also get a really important extra that's just called Amazing Tales from the Archive, Restoring the Half-Breed. What this is the film's restorer talking for 45 minutes at the San Francisco Silent Film Festival in front of an audience, going over the painstaking efforts it took to bring this film back to life, how badly it had been treated over the years. He has images and clips from all the various cut-down versions. He explains how badly this film was treated, how the story was altered and changed, how the characters were altered and changed, what the edits did, what the condition of all the elements were, where they were in the world, how they had to source them. He talks at length about the title cards and how they had to painstakingly reconstruct them and rewrite them to be the original 1916 title cards. It is an absolute masterclass in film restoration, and particularly for silent film restoration and preservation. It is a must-watch. Again, it's 45 minutes long, and it will tell you everything about the film you needed to know and about just how much of a miraculous treasure it is that we have it reconstructed and restored on this Blu-ray release. And again, it is just a great extra. It is just basically a camera in the audience section, so that it is obviously a live Q&A sort of session. It's also on the San Francisco Silent Film Society's YouTube page. You can actually look at this on YouTube if you haven't picked up this release, and I'll include a link in the description to that below. Or if you're curious about the restoration of this film and interested about maybe picking this up, but you want to know more information, you can watch this entire 45-minute presentation on the film festival's YouTube page. So again, I've got the link in the description below. So in summary, I think this is one of the best silent Blu-rays Kino Lorber has ever released. I think it is one of their best releases, period. It is frequently included in their site sales and usually kind of glossed over because most people aren't interested in silence, or they just say, oh, it's a silent, and they just kind of gloss past it and they think it may not have extras. However, for the rather low purchase price, and even lower when it's included in their frequent site sales, you get a really great feature film and wonderful restoration in The Good Bad Man, and a silent masterpiece in The Half-Breed. So you're getting 2 films for the price of 1, plus 2 audio commentaries, plus the must-watch 45-minute restoration piece, plus beautiful new scores, and absolutely gorgeous artwork. That, of course, is, again, double-sided, so you get nice reversible artwork for both films. So these are incredible silent film restorations and preservations. This is already a very affordable, inexpensive Blu-ray that I think is one of the most underrated in Kino's catalog. I think it's one of the best silent Blu-rays they've ever done. I think this is a must-own title. This is a must-own silent Blu-ray. The bang for your buck on display here with 2 features, extras, reversible artwork, and 2 commentaries for a very low purchase price is insane. This is a must-own title, and I really want to encourage people to see The Half-Breed because it is a truly majestic, fantastic masterpiece silent film when seen in this restored version, approximating the original 1916 release version, which without this effort had been lost to time. This is a truly great film. This is both of these features are great and wonderful and must for Fairbanks fanatics like myself. I am so pleased that there's this beautiful, affordable, well-made Blu-ray release that is again an absolute must for any silent film library, and one of the best releases Kino Lorber has ever done. This is a must from their catalog. I would recommend this to anyone. This is a great stuffed release with incredible value for the money. And again, the Half-Breed itself, seen in its restored version here, is an absolute silent masterpiece that needs to be seen and discussed more by as many people as possible. So those are my thoughts on the Kino Lorber release of the two restorations of The Good Bad Man and The Half-Breed, both from 1916, both directed by Allan Dwan, photographed by Victor Fleming, and starring the iconic, legendary Douglas Fairbanks Sr. These are two incredible, wonderful films seen here in presentations that make you marvel over the quality in them in spite of the wear over the passage of time. It's amazing we have these and we can now watch them whenever we want, but The Half-Breed especially is a silent masterpiece that I just was bowled over by. I think both films are excellent, but The Half-Breed is a masterpiece, and I would encourage anyone to check out this release. This is a beautiful Blu-ray. It's loaded with great extras at a really inexpensive list price, and it's frequently in Kino's site sales for even as low as $10 or $12. It is a no-brainer. I would recommend this to anyone. It is a phenomenal must-own release. And so with that, I hope, as always, my babblings about classic films and physical media releases has been at least somewhat fun and informative. And as I always say in these videos, please do keep supporting both studio and boutique labels by buying films on disc to help keep both physical media and film culture alive. And thank you ever so much for watching.